pledge allegiance to the flag of the United
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. So we'll begin with our introductions tonight. I am Ed Theobald, Town of Manlius Supervisor.
Sarah Bollinger, Counselor.
John Deere, Counselor.
Elaine Denton, Town Councilor.
Karen Green, Deputy Supervisor.
Caitlin Creasel, Town Councilor.
Heather Waters, Town Councilor.
And with us tonight are other town officials. We have Police Chief Mike Kroll. There is our Director of Code Enforcement Officer, Randy Capriati. We have Highway Superintendent, Rob Cushing. Town Attorney, Tim Ferteski. Town Engineer, Doug Miller. We have our Town Clerk, Allison Weber. And Deputy Clerk, Deb Witzel. Very good. So as is the norm of late, we will be having our open podium meeting beginning shortly. I know we do have someone that will be, I'm not sure what the topic is, but just as a review for those who have not done this yet, it's sort of like the public hearing, 3 to 5 minutes to speak. The purpose of the public comment period is to discuss town business only. Just as a reminder, not that we need to worry about this, but it is important to acknowledge that, personal attacks, personal accusations, irrelevant or unduly repetitious, man, did I write this? Communications or other disruptive behavior that actually disrupt, disturb, or impede the orderly conduct of the business of the board at the discretion of the town supervisor, incur a warning, recess of the meeting, or other appropriate actions to allow the board to resume the orderly conduct of town business. So again, it's always just nice to review those things. Like I said, not that we need to be concerned, but it's good to overview those every now and then. So with that, Deb or Allison, who's right?
I'm going to take that. So there's going to be a little, is this setup working?
Okay.
Testing going on right now because Mr. Wagner is going to be on speakerphone. He has called in. Okay. Mr. Wagner? Okay. Can everybody on the meeting hear Mr. Wagner?
No.
No? Okay. All right, let's try this again. Okay. Mr. Wagner, why don't you introduce yourself and we'll see if this is working. No? Okay, hang on. Hang on one second.
All right. Go ahead, Mr. Wagner.
Okay, to begin with, I only want to take 5 minutes of your time and briefly introduce myself. I reside at 206 East Genesee Street, Fayetteville, New York, for 67.5 years. My father was chairman of the town of Manlius Democrat. And I met people like Charlie O'Shea on the general store out in Fabius. And I got to know politics. He wrote a lot of letters about his concerns. And I have now observed a lot of the functions of going back to Lowenberg. And then we get into Hank Chapman and how they acted. And with anything, it's a physical thing. For every action, there is a reaction. And part of the reason I want to talk is about one Archaeobanese link. So one, we can educate the public on the overall function of which on October 27th, I spoke to COLIA accessors. And these accessors report to Paul McMillan in Dover, Massachusetts. And these assessors are actually educators. And they're trying to educate the people of law enforcement and the need for public safety, because he wants to have a marriage. You know, like you going down the aisle with a man, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, right now, Officer or Detective Gallup had me arrested. Greg Snyder arrested me for indecent exposure. And that would be like me coming down to the town hall or Sky or Zoom and dropping my pants. Now, the only time I want to drop my pants is in the bathroom. So obviously something is very wrong. So if the chief could get a hold of Timmy Fischetti and he could call my criminal defense lawyer, Jordan McCullen, 422-0501, I would greatly appreciate it. And then I'm going to come back to you on the next meeting and give you more data. I've met Mrs. Waters out in the campaign trail. I have yet to meet Mrs. Denton. Most of you women I met on Channel 9 News. Okay? So, news is important to us. I don't believe what Elizabeth Doran and her boss, Steve Billmeister, write in the newspaper is a true picture.
Mr. Wagner, it's Tim Fertuski. Mr. Wagner, it's Tim Fertuski.
Paul, can you hear? Can you hear?
Yeah.
We're beyond the 5 minutes, and
Okay, thank you.
all right, and I will call you tomorrow.
Yeah.
All right, I'll call you tomorrow.
Okay, thank you for your time.
All right. Take care, Paul.
Hi, Mr. Wagner.
Okay. Very, very good. Allison, do we have, or Deb, do we have anyone else on the open podium?
I see 2 attendees in the room. One is Mr. Poltenson. The other is a Juliana Smith. If either of you would like to speak at open podium, just use the Q&A function or raise your hand.
I think it would be an appropriate time to just mention for anyone watching, We have a fantastic police department that has lots of ways to get in touch with, especially through our website. There's a complaint form. There's a compliment form there. So if there's any feedback to the police department, I don't think Open Podium's the best place to do that, but we definitely have avenues for everybody to get in touch with our police department.
Yeah, thank you, John. I appreciated what Supervisor Theobald said too at the beginning, which is that Open Podium is really to bring up issues that will be relevant to the entire town, and are not specific about specific matters. So never to dissuade anyone from joining. And I think also that Mr. Wagner it sounded maybe at different points like he was going to raise things that were more general. So I was trying to follow that line for sure. But I agree with what you've said, Sean. Thank you.
And, you know, for the record, Paul Wagner has called me numerous times with some of the same concerns and comments. So, anyone else?
Nope. Nope. I think we're all set to proceed with the business meeting.
Very good. All right, then we will move on to item 4, which is the approval of the minutes of January 27th.
Mr. Supervisor, I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes from January 27th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any discussion? Okay. Opposed? And carried. Now we have the abstract number 3, which is item.
Mr. Supervisor, we have an exciting abstract this month.
Yes, I know.
So I'd like to make people aware that this is the month where we pay our fire and sewer districts. So I would like to make a motion to approve abstract number 3 in the amount of $4,838,631.37.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those checks will be signed and delivered. Opposed, anyone? And carried. Very good. Thank you, Sarah, for that. And we'll move on to, now we have the public hearing, which is perfect. We're at 6:45. And this is the draft of the local law authorizing the planning board to issue special permits for energy systems. I think, Tim, you will be taking the lead on this, if I'm not mistaken, before we open up the public hearing, and if any of the board has further comments at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. As we discussed at the last meeting, back in August of last year, the town board amended the special use permit section of our code to delegate authority to the planning board for issuing special use permits. There was a section in the solar energy law that refers to the town board doing special permits, and this just cleans that up to make it clear that the intention has always been for the planning board to also do special use permits for solar energy projects.
Very good. Board, anyone have anything to add to that, or are we ready to waive the reading of the public notice? Okay, so I need a motion to waive the reading of the public notice.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. And now we need a motion to open the public hearing.
A move to open the public hearing.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed and carried. As the norm with the public hearing, if anyone is out there that has any comments that they'd like to make on this, the norm, I notify, or there's a Q&A. I don't know if there's a hands up or not either, but if there is anything, please identify yourselves and your address and so on, and 3 to 5 minutes to speak.
I don't see any comments. Oh, there is a hand up. Mr. Poltenson would like to speak. Mr. Poltenson, if you could use the Q&A to type your question.
Okay, Mr. Poltenson,
Yep,
go ahead, you can speak now.
okay. The planning board has issued permits for 6 or 7 commercial solar arrays over the past 5 or 6 years. And those leases run for 25 to 30 years, and they cover some very substantial pieces of land. Most of them take anywhere from 10 to 25 acres. What's interesting is that none of them to date has put a shovel in the ground. So my question is, are we or should we put a time limit from the time that we approve the permit to the time something actually happens on construction? Or do we have an open-ended system here where if nothing happens, nothing happens, but they still have the permit to do what they've said they're going to do, but they haven't done it?
You want me to handle that question, Mr.
Yes,
Supervisor? Thank you, Arnie. It's a good question. We have in the past put sunsets on approvals for site plan approvals and for special, usually it's a 7-year permit for special use permits. But for site plan approval, the planning board has in the past put a sunset provision on them. It doesn't always do that. It has the authority to do that anytime it wants. I personally think it's a good idea that we do that so that we avoid the exact type of problem that you're pointing out.
Okay, thank you, Tim.
You're welcome.
Mr. Supervisor, Tim,
Yes.
I thought we had put the sunset in there for 2 years in the past.
Well, I thought for abundance.
Sunset for a 2-year project. If it wasn't,
I think that was only the one on the landfill.
Yeah, the abundant, I believe.
Yeah, that was if they, because we have a lease with them.
Yeah.
And we had determined that if they didn't have the interconnect agreement in place within 2 years, then the lease would be null and void. And then we can use that property for whatever else we wanted to, or find another solar company to do that. But that was specific to the lease for that property on the landfill.
Yeah, the others are on private property, Karen. I think that's what Arnie's referencing.
Yeah, but his point is that we have several commercial approved solar farms that are not being developed. And it also raises the issue that we have a provision of our law that says that you can't construct a solar farm within 1 mile of an existing solar farm. And the town's position has been that we won't even entertain an application if it's within 1 mile of an approved subdivision or an approved site plan. So I think I'd like the board to think through that issue and kind of get back to me with some feedback on how they would like to handle that. Because we have actually rejected applications because they're within 1 mile of an approved site.
Tim,
So
do you
I'd like
recall
to
the thought process on that? Oh, I'm sorry, Caitlin. Go ahead.
I just wanted to share some background on the project and kind of the timeframes that they follow, some of the history with this issue, because Mr. Poltenson's question is a very sound one and certainly a reasonable concern. When we think about community solar, typically for those of us who are really passionate about the issue, we like to think that it's good people doing good work to save the planet. But that's not always the case. Just because someone's doing renewable energy doesn't necessarily mean that they have the best of intentions. And when New York State started allowing for community solar, there were companies from out of state and sent tens of thousands of letters to landowners all around New York State with contracts promising them the world being entered into a legally binding contract between the landowner and the developer for lease payments that we likely would never get. It's very difficult to successfully develop a community solar project. The land needs to be perfect, and it needs to be near 3-phase power. There needs to be room on those power lines, and because of the very predatory legal practices that were being utilized by these out-of-state developers, New York State said you cannot submit anything to utility for approval until you have control of the land. You need to have a contract signed, and they were trying to prevent this issue that had happened when they first opened up community solar in New York State. So when a solar developer does sign the contract with the landowner, it's only then that they can really start the process of evaluating whether or not you can put solar on the land, and it takes a long time. So I agree that it shouldn't be into perpetuity. We can certainly look into a time limit for that, but the solar developers, now that the process has been cleaned up by NYSERDA, New York State, and utilities, and the Public Service Commission, if the developers want it done, it's being held up by the utilities and getting it through their approval process. So it's kind of a fine line. Like, if we want to incentivize renewable energy and we want to see this type of development in the community, we can certainly put a time frame on it to try to push it along. But I would be cautious with that because these projects become very time consuming. Our project on our landfill could take years before we even know that we can break ground. So hopefully it won't, but it could. So that's some background info, and it's something we can look into, but I'd be cautious about what time limit we really consider setting on it.
Okay. And John, did you have something?
Yeah, I wanted to, what is the normal sunset timeline? Is it, I think 7 years is what I understand to be usually what happens on these things.
Are you asking me, John?
Anybody has an answer?
So on our special permits, we always had a 7-year special permit. We really don't have any statute or in local law that puts a sunset on a site plan, but it's common in many towns to work with the developer of the project for the site plan and say, if you don't pull a building permit within 2 years, then come back to us for an extension of the site plan approval, or don't come back to us, but your site plan will expire.
Yep.
So we don't have all these site plans that have been approved that just kind of sit around and do nothing.
Okay, because it sounds like, to me at least, that, I mean, either a solution like that would help with, having to deny applications that are within a mile of of essentially an empty field or undeveloped piece of land. But I think too, it's the question of was the no solar farm within a mile of another solar farm. I think it sounds like the intent there is to keep them from clustering and
Yes.
It
was a saturation issue.
Yeah, and I think I think it sounds like we have a couple conversations. One, does that still stand? Does that still make sense? Is that something that maybe the planning board can take in consideration when doing that? But also too, this idea, Tim, I like that idea of you have 2 years to do something, otherwise we have to assume nothing's going to happen. But it sounds like in this case, Caitlin, like you're saying, 2 years might not be enough.
We just have to hear from you. We have to understand what's going on.
And that's normally what we've done is, there's a 2-year sunset, and you just have to come in and say, hey, I'm struggling, I need another 2 years. And normally what the planning board has done is grants another 2 years.
This may also help them get, like, if they go to the utility and say, hey, I got to have an answer by November, that may actually help them get something through.
Yeah, and all the sites that that Arnie talks about, you know, when they get to us, they're approved for interconnects. So, you know, the question the planning board's been struggling with, and I just sent Tim a note, some neighboring communities have had the same issue, is there appears to be, you know, a lot of these solar facilities, and, you know, at the planning board meeting the other night, the question was asked to one of the solar companies, you know, is there a reason, you know, I mean, it was just a rhetorical question. There's a reason some of our projects aren't moving forward, and gentleman from Wildcat said, I don't know if I can speak for Wildcat, you know, we're going to start this in, you know, in May. So I think, you know, I think there's a little bit of legwork. We've got a planning board agenda Friday morning, and, you know, I told Tim that Jamie and I were going to, you know, maybe revisit this and maybe talk to Robert Germain and Cicero and see, you know, what they're seeing. But I mean, right now it's, you know, I mean, we've got a lot of solar. It's a great thing. You know, it's a great problem to have. You know, I mean, so we'll just, you know.
Yeah, so if we could maybe circle back around to the local law, which is really the focus here of authorizing the planning board to issue special permits. Are we talking about adding some of these things in there? Is that what we're looking at, or is that something we still want to leave up to the planning board?
I think Randy wanted to say something.
Randy, go ahead, sorry.
I just finding out recently that a lot of these solar farms are signing very short-term contracts with the homeowners. We'll say 2 years or 3 years, bringing it to the planning board, getting the approval, and then locking the land up for the length of the lease, which is 3 years, we'll say, with the homeowner, looking for other areas. So at least they can say, we do have one site locked down, and they keep looking for more and more. I just ran into that this week with a couple of them that they want them to sign a contract, but they don't know when they want to start the process. And like Caitlin said, they can't come to the planning board and propose their project for approval until they have a lease in place with the homeowner or the landowner. So once they go through the process, now they can sit on it simply because they might be looking for another site in the area, and they don't want another company coming in down the road using another site. So if it's went to the planning board, gets their approval with no sunset on it, it's kind of unlimited time that they have that they can do this on it. And I think that's what we're seeing recently that came up in the last 2 weeks. I don't know if Tim or Doug, if you had seen that in other agencies either, but that I just found that out this week.
Yeah, I think I got the same phone call, Randy. It was somebody in Manlius who called,
Yeah.
and it said the same thing. And I think he said he had spoken to you too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Karen?
Yeah.
But I mean, the other thing is, as far as changing the law, planning board was, I mean, Arnie's still on the line. The planning board is, you know, totally in support of, you know, doing what Tim said to clean up that site plan glitch.
The law that we're going over tonight, though, is this something that we can just pass now and then discuss this other element later?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think so. I think so, Caitlin.
Discuss this. I mean, it's certainly been a good discussion. I think we can stick a pin in this and look into it more and discuss, but because I feel like we don't, like, we're all just speaking kind of anecdotally, but I think that there's an opportunity to dig in a little further, and we can talk more about this perhaps at the next meeting.
Yeah. And we,
The-
Karen,
With the
Yeah.
planning, oh, sorry.
Karen, go ahead.
Yeah, I just, Doug, you mentioned your meeting Friday, and I think it would be very beneficial if we could get a recommendation from the planning board. You know, this is happening all over the country, so I think they would offer a lot of information.
Sure, we can do that. I'll pass that along to
Recommendations.
Joe and Jamie and
Mhm.
Arnie and company. Yep.
I would be also interested in evaluating this 1 mile law. Like, I don't know if other communities have done that or if it does really make sense. There's only so much solar you can put on a wire anyway. So we can't cluster community solar in our town. Our mile law doesn't change anything really, because where you physically put it, if those wires already have solar on them, you can't put solar panels right next door to it. It won't work. There's not enough space on the wires. These wires were built Like all this infrastructure is old. It's been there since they put it up, and it's not retrofitted for this type of technology. So if the 1 mile thing is preventing other solar developers from doing good projects because other solar developers have tried to just put in their get in line, like I think that's pretty disadvantageous all around. So I think that this is something worth looking into. Randy and Doug, if you could help me look into this, and we can certainly talk to the planning board as well.
Yep, I'll pass it on. Good input.
Arnie, thank you for coming on tonight.
Oh, my pleasure, Karen. Good to talk to everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Barney.
Anyone else out there, Allison or Deb?
No, there's no one else there.
What else? Okay.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Very good. Thank you, Sarah. That was good. I'm just about to ask for that. So now Tim, you want to take the lead on this as far as any of the unlisted action? I don't know if that has to be covered in this.
Well, we did seeker for the local law that passed in 2000 in last August. So we already did the environmental impacts review of this. This is simply to allow the planning board to do what the town board has done. And in fact, I would argue that the local law we passed already gave that authority to the planning board. This is more of a cleanup thing than anything. So,
all right.
So I think I don't think this, from my perspective, this not to clean up the law will not have a significant environmental impact.
Very
Unless
good.
somebody disagrees with me and we want to go through the secret process.
No, we're good. So we'll need a motion.
So what I think I'm hearing is that we can approve the planning board having special use authority,
Mhm.
and then also discuss if there's other issues we would like to attend to in a separate time.
I think that's correct.
Perfect.
Yep.
So is that your motion?
I'll make that a motion to please approve the local law that we have in front of us.
Okay.
And I will second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed and carried. Very good.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Excellent conversation. Good discussions. All right, next we have up the item 7. Allison, we're looking at our polling place agreement again. So if you wanna-
Yes, I think it's the standard agreement that they send. Tim has reviewed the agreement and recommends approval, so I would just need a motion to authorize the supervisor to sign the polling place agreement with Onondaga County.
Mr. Supervisor, I'd be glad to make the motion for you to enter into agreement with Onondaga County for the use of polling here at the town hall.
I'd be happy to second it, but before I do, just want to make a shout out to everyone in the community to think about becoming a poll worker. It's a huge need, and you can contact the Board of Elections to do that. But I'll also second the motion.
Thank you, Heather. Tim, anything additional you want to make on the agreement?
No, it's a simple agreement. It has the normal provisions in there in terms of them indemnifying us for anything that they do that would cause us a problem. So from an exposure standpoint, I'm comfortable with it.
Very good. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Very good. Thank you, Allison. Next, we have a couple of appointments coming up here. The planning board appointment. Sarah, Caitlin, who has the information? We want to give that?
You want us to give an update on the planning board appointment?
Yes, yes. So we can, make a motion to appoint someone if that's what you're ready to do.
I think so. So Sarah and I met with a few candidates for people from the community for the planning board, and there were a couple really qualified candidates, and it was a very tough decision, but we did come to a unanimous selection on the person that we ended up selecting. Sarah, would you like to? I don't know. I wasn't really prepared to talk much about this. Sarah, if you want to help me out.
Lupia was there also, just to
Yeah.
reference that he was part of it.
Yes, and Joe Lupio was there. Thanks, Sarah.
So Ed, do you have her name or do we need to give it
Do you
to you?
want to tell you?
Yeah.
You have it, and I've set it aside, so if you could give that.
So it, I just want to make sure that I'm, yeah, it's Valerie Ferguson Beecher was the candidate that we selected.
Yes, yeah, I called Valerie, so I better remember. So, and this is for the new term, no, this is to fill,
This is to fill Frank Mento's term.
which ended on December 31st. So this is a 7-year,
Yes.
okay, that Valerie will be appointed. So we need one of you to make it.
So I'll make a motion to nominate Valerie Beecher for a 7-year term on the planning board.
And I'll,
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Very good. And yes, Caitlin, I did get a chance to talk with Joe too, and he did say it was very good interviewees, and it was pretty tight. So it was good work. Good work.
it was really nice. It was nice to get a chance to speak with some new faces and to meet some new people in the community that I hadn't had a chance to meet before. I do know Valerie a little bit, just through different things in the community where we've crossed paths, but she's really strong on her interest in planning. She was very active in the Magnan Farms proposal that came up, and at the time was showing us all these maps. She'd found all these laws. She really dug into the engineering process, and she asked a ton of questions during her interview and was clearly very passionate about planning. And one of the things that she mentioned that we all found really interesting was being more intentional in our planning, like actively recruiting types of development that we might want to see. And you'll be happy to know, Ed, she's really excited about a town park. So we are, we're interested. It'll be nice to have, and Joe and Sarah and I did talk about having more diversity on the planning board, having more women and having more younger folks represented, which just with how the board has, how things have fallen, it's certainly much more male dominated than it otherwise could be. So we're excited to have another woman on the board and someone that's from one of the younger generations to diversify that team. So she's going to be a great addition. I'm very excited that she's been appointed.
Yeah, and Joe especially pointed out the questions that she had asked you. So
Yeah.
Very good. So we're all set with Valerie. Congratulations, Valerie. Now it's official. And next we have the ZBA appointment. Karen, I think, or Heather.
Yeah, Mr. Supervisor, a couple of weeks ago, Heather and I and Chairman Kelly met. We had 2 applicants, and again, they were both very qualified, extremely pleasant to talk with, and have both had a lot to offer. We have reselected, I must say, Claire Miller. She was appointed a year and a half ago to the zoning board. She has done a tremendous job, and we have elected to reappoint her for the 5-year term. So I'd like to make a motion, please, to appoint Claire Miller to the Zoning Board of Appeals.
I'd be happy to second that.
Very good. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed and carried. And again, congratulations, Claire. It's official for you too. So, and I did get a chance to reach out to them to let them know that tonight would be the.
Oh, good. Good.
So they had to hold their breath, for a couple of days. So thank you both, all 4 of you, and of course the chairman working on this. It's something that we sort of developed a few years ago. Such like the highway department, he has a committee that does the interviews for employment there too. So it seems to be works pretty good, very objective, very thorough, and I'm very happy with the outcome of the process that you all provide. So thank you very much for that. So with that, we will now move on to item 10, which is the comprehensive plan with Barton and Judas. You've all had a chance, I think, to look at the documents. I know Heather, Sarah, you and I have been in emails with Molly quite a bit here. Would either of you like to give us a little update on where we are with the agreement?
Well, Sarah and I didn't coordinate speaking about it at this moment, but I want to acknowledge Sarah's thorough work as always in providing and making available to all of us her comments and her ideas in response to the contract. We circulated the contract, but Sarah, if you don't mind sharing what your responses were and what we're looking to update on it, and that I think that would be really useful for folks.
So, you know, the overall contract was in fact what we asked for, so there's nothing wrong with it. But in considering the details of it, I tried to look at how long it would take to do each step of the process and the level of community engagement that we expect to occur, and the amount of, you know, it would be sort of pop-up things if there were to be people in parks to go talk to, those kinds of things. And so we wanted to allow more time for that and to use a stronger collection process of the initial ideas. So Heather and I actually have an appointment with them for Friday to revamp the timeline. So it's not really the content, but it's more the timeline to extend it out so that we spend more of the spring and summer engaged with the residents and then move to the writing more in the fall. So that's the gist of my recommendation. And we're going to follow up with them to have them resubmit this proposal with a few tweaks.
Yeah, and then at that point, we can have more discussion as far as, you know, voting on it at maybe the next meeting if you have it all wrapped up by then. But I do entertain any questions right now if anyone has that has had a chance to look at the contract. Any questions pop out to anybody?
Mr. Supervisor, Sarah, what jumps out at me with this is the fee schedule.
Mhm.
I think in the budget for this year, we had 50,000 and set aside for this project. Is it going to be capped? Is your recommendation to be capped at 50,000?
Yes, we'll move the puzzle pieces within that overall square of the total amount.
Because as you read it, you know, there are several items in there where I could see this project getting well over budget in a very small amount of time. So I have some concerns about that.
And that's part of why we want the time is if we are engaging volunteers to do those activities so that we're not paying extra for it, there's a little bit more time involved in, you know, getting people organized for those kinds of things.
Well, and that was the other thing. I know when it was first discussed, we were looking at 2 to 3 years in completion, and then this says 10 to 14 months, I think, or 12 to 12.
Yeah, I think you're accurate.
Pardon?
So that's why I want to extend it back out to being more like, you know, 20 months kind of thing.
Yeah, through the review process, with the applicants, all of them seem to condense our original timeline a little bit through their experience, but maybe we're talking about meeting in the middle in that case.
Yeah, I just think we have to keep our eye on the cap.
Okay. Yeah. I think we can be very clear with them about that.
Yeah, I think we're committed to that. And Sarah made a really good suggestion about how there were some added, you know, engagement things and things that they offer that they could do that would be over and above. But that gives us a lot of opportunity to think about sponsorship. Maybe there are, and again, the volunteer opportunities and partnerships that would not cost us. But having the, yeah. So I think it's something to consider.
I'm sorry, Heather. I was just going to add to that we need to make sure that if there are going to be additional costs, both parties agree to them. That was my kind of review of the contract.
Yes, and we shared that edit to make sure it was included in the final contract, so that will be.
So that way we won't be surprised. I mean, if if somewhere down the line, we decide, well, that service might be beneficial to us and we will agree to it, then we just amend it to allow that to happen.
And that'll be part of our budget process, of course, going forward too, for 22, you know, which is, we'll have a better idea of where we are, I would hope, by the end of this year, you know, with the plan. So, very good. Well, thank you, Sarah and Heather. Like I said, I know you guys have been tackling it because I've been following the emails and doing a really excellent job there. So keep up the good work. So we can move on then, since that'll be more documented at our next meeting. So moving on to, we have the standards for electronic real property tax administration. Tim, I think you and Pat have been working on this, so you can give us an update on this.
Well, Pat has asked the board to consider allowing grievances to be filed by email or e-filed. If the board thinks that's a good idea, Pat does think it's a good idea. If the board agrees that it's a good idea, then we have to pass a resolution to allow that to happen, but also come up with some timeframes and policies that I'll have to work with Pat on. I guess tonight I'm just trying to get a sense that if the board feels this is a good idea, we have to get something in place probably by the next meeting.
Yeah, John. Oh, is that
Yeah, so I had a outsized role in the the assessment process last year as we were doing it remotely via Zoom, and I think this would be I know we had people it was a tough time and there were deadlines and very specific deadlines, got to be in a Dropbox by a certain time, and I think something like this is exactly the right kind of step forward that we've been taking, and I'd love to see something like this be able to happen, because I know too, sustainability, less paper is always great, making it so people don't have to come down to town hall, if we're still in this situation, come later this year. But I think this is exactly the right step forward to make this process a little easier and a little less intensive.
When I talked with Pat about it, thank you, John, for sharing that. I agree. When I talked with Pat about it, he said that they were basically already operating in this manner, accepting these, and that this is sort of codifying. Is it codifying or codifying? Codifying, I'm wondering now in my head. Yeah, is making
right.
Thank you. Is sort of formalizing what at the state level, and sort of what assessors have been asking for to be made part of the law.
Right. Is
that correct?
Yeah, talking to Pat, I get that same agreement there.
Great. So that's great that we're just moving forward.
All right.
So I think, Tim, if you would be willing to report back on the process part, because I think the frustration that John referred to were people who thought they were following the rules and weren't, and were pretty upset when they found out that they had missed a piece. So I think we need to be very clear with residents of how the process would work.
Okay, I will get with Pat. I will have a resolution drafted for the next meeting with time frame. It does specifically say that if there are problems with your hardware, your communications, or that it's the town's responsibility for those types of things. That's why they encourage people to get everything in earlier and all of that. So I will talk to Pat and we'll have something drafted for the next board.
Would this be an assessment? What kind of a document would this be considered?
No, it's gonna simply, and we could pass a resolution tonight authorizing the e-filing of grievances, and that would be as simple as, but along with it has to come some standards and some guidelines as to when you can file, how you can file, and some dates.
So that's what you'll come back with, and then
yes.
Okay, very good, excellent. Anyone else? Any other questions for Tim? Very good. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Next we have the standard Workday resolution, which I believe Allison, I think we've all had a chance to look at that.
Yes.
It's that, Allison.
Yep. It's my understanding that this is two members of our ZBA. And the way the resolution works is there is, you have to record your activities for 3 contiguous months. And due to COVID, they had to record their activities a little bit later just because we weren't operating normally. So this resolution is to approve that. That's why it is separate from the other resolutions that we've done before.
Yep, okay, this is standard procedure though that we're looking at here. Anyone have any questions? If not, we need a motion for that, to approve this.
Heather, did you have something? I'll make a motion to accept these standard Workday resolution for state retirement.
Very good.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
Okay, Terry, very good. Thank you, Allison. And so we're moving right along here. All right, Rob Cushing, besides a lot of salting and plowing, what do you have for us tonight?
Well, just wanted to update the board, actually. Just working with my staff this week, we're trying to put together some specs. It should be some fairly standard specs. Hopefully, John and Sarah, I've got something for early next week to kind of have you two review on those 2 pickups that we budgeted for this year. Already hearing that, the build out dates are getting there. So I want to try and get those done here, maybe at the next board meeting, and get those approved if we can. Other than that, Mr. Supervisor, I'm pretty good tonight.
Very good, Rob. And keep up the good work out there. You guys are doing great. I'm getting a lot of compliments. I don't know if you are or not, but I am.
Surprisingly, it's been fairly good. We haven't had that hard of a winter, really. So the last couple of weeks, it's been difficult. But, I look at it this way, maybe 4 or 5 more weeks where we're getting towards the other end, So Tim likes to remind me the temperatures are coming up now. So.
But the days are longer.
Oh, I know.
The sunshine is really welcome. It doesn't feel like, I'm not trying to jinx us, but it doesn't feel like a regular February.
That's right, Heather.
It's cold enough for me. All right, Randy, do you have anything for us tonight?
Yep, the only thing that I have that is Lisa and I, Mike and Dave, we compiled all the data for the annual report.
Oh, yeah.
That took a while to get all the numbers. It's just a question now that I got to upload it to the state, which time we'll get a copy. And once we get the official copy, the manual will be put on the front counter for anybody that wants to review it.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Randy. Doug, for tonight, I know you and I discussed this earlier. I've had a couple of individuals that have reached out to me, 2 different locations regarding lights in their district as far as adding them to the different locations. Doug has reached out to National Grid for these 2 locations and has come back with cost and locations. And from what I can see, very reasonable cost for these additions. So Doug, can you give us an overview of the 2 locations that
Sure.
we can talk about tonight?
So there are 2 locations that we discussed with National Grid. They turned it right around. One is at the intersection of Route 5 and Springview Drive in the Changing Seasons neighborhood. Cost for annual, first of all, there's an installation because there's not a pole there. So there's a one-time installation fee of $856 and an estimated annual cost of the light for $111.82. And I've worked with the town manager. This is a pretty insignificant cost to that lighting district. So the recommendation would be to proceed with that light at that location. And then there was a second light at a request at 227 McLennan, and there is a pole there. So the annual cost for that light is $95.97. No installation cost because there's an existing pole. So they're both insignificant costs, and the recommendation would be to add those 2 lights, give National Grid the go-ahead, and they be incorporated into the lighting district for the town.
And that's in the Homewood area.
Yep.
Pole. So, and it certainly makes sense to me. Like I said, I've had individuals reach out, and it does look like the lighting is needed in those areas, especially the spring view. So we'll do this separately, and we would add these to the existing districts. I imagine that's the motion that would be made.
That's correct.
Anyone would like to make the motion? We'll start with
So
this.
I'll make a motion to add the Springview intersection street light to the lighting district.
Second?
I had a question.
Yep, any discussion? I was just gonna ask. Go ahead.
Thank you. I was just wondering, and like with these costs, it probably doesn't make sense, but I was wondering, have we ever looked into, and I don't know how they work, but solar lights for streetlights? I don't know any information on those.
I know these are LED, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, okay.
We haven't, but I could certainly do that.
Like,
You know, I was going to mention too, Elaine, that in Caitlin, in looking at these two, we've also been aware that there's a new lighting program being proposed by National Grid. So
Okay.
we've got, I believe it's 4 neighborhoods, and the two that come to mind are the Dartmoor Crossing neighborhood and Eagle View. And the new program is for ornamental lights. So our contact at Grid mentioned this to us when we were looking at these lights. His recommendation is to wait until April or May, because at that point, the Public Services Commission agreements with National Grid come into play. So the deal is good now, but in April or May, it could even get better. And it's replacement of the full heads. And when you look at it, I can forward any information anybody wants, but it's replacement of the whole head, and there's certain heads that are out there. So it's pretty cool, but I could do the same to see, you know, what Grid has out there for solar. As of right now, I'm not aware they do, but I've seen them at the school district, so it's a great question.
I thought Fayetteville has put some in as well, but I don't know, maybe not. Like with these again, because the lighting district's already there, so I think this makes sense, but especially for future or newer lighting areas, maybe looking into that option and just to compare would be great.
Yep, that'd be great. Yep, good idea.
Quick question. Are these districts, they're what would be the thought process, Elaine? You're trying to figure out if we could do solar lights to install those instead of the LED lights. Is this a bill that the town pays or something else?
Well, I mean, right, every we get the abstracts and we get the electric bills, right, for the lights. So that's my idea or question is, does that make sense to keep paying, or could we reduce costs even farther?
The town right now is looking at community solar. So even before the landfill project, we're looking at entering into an agreement to procure our energy from a community solar project, which would come with a discount on our electricity. So even if the light isn't being, because I'm guessing that the solar lights are probably more expensive.
Yeah.
And so if we're powering our, it wouldn't be direct, like we're not like switching the light on and it's coming from solar, but we'd be offsetting our usage with solar. That's probably the more cost-effective way to go about that. Where a solar light would be really effective is if it wasn't connected to the grid. So like when you're driving and you see like a sign for construction and you see like a solar panel on it, it's because they can't plug it in anywhere. So it's a really effective solution, but only if it's kind of on its own. So that just off the top of my head, I think that we are working toward that, but maybe in more of an indirect way.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Caitlin. Our firm just completed a project like that where we had significant cost, and we can keep our eyes out for these type of things. We had a significant cost to replace something using traditional electricity, and we scrapped that in lieu of batteries and solar power. And it was a win-win for everybody. So I think you're both spot on.
Yep, well, that's great for future consideration. That's for sure. So with that, we've had motions, and so I would just ask all in favor.
Aye.
Okay, opposed? And carried. Very good. And now we need a motion for the McLennan lights as well.
So, Mr. Supervisor, I'll make a motion to put a streetlight on the pole outside of 227 McLennan in the Homewood neighborhood.
I'll second that.
Good. And we'll just continue the.
And
comment.
add it to the lighting district.
Yes, and that's late. Very good. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed and carried. Very good. Thank you, Doug. Thank you, board. I think my connection will be very happy when I email her this tomorrow. So unless she's listening in. Moving out, Tim, you're up next. Do you have anything for us tonight?
Well, I have provided to the board a draft of a local law that would allow various types of animals, small animals, chickens, goats, and
pigs.
I don't know if pigs was in there, but anyway, that's part of the discussion. So I passed that along because there have been, as you all remember, requests from residents who have animals who we would consider farm animals, but they really are domestic for them, and allow them in certain zonings in our town. So I have provided that draft to everybody, and I think tonight we just kind of wanted to start off the discussion. Elaine has been doing the most research on this. She's the one that's most involved, so I'm going to kind of turn it over to her to discuss.
Very good. Thank you. Go ahead, Elaine.
Okay, thanks. So I met with Randy and Tim and Councilor Creasel in January, and we talked about allowing chickens and other small animals in residential zones. The first thing I asked was if we've had any complaints or any issues that we were receiving, and Randy let us know that there wasn't really any complaints or issues. Mostly residents were calling and asking if they could have chicken. So since there were no complaints or issues, the problem that I saw was that our residents wanted chickens, but if you live in a residential zone, you currently are only allowed to have a 50 square foot structure for dogs or cats, but nothing else. No other animals due to our domestic household pet definition. So we came up with a simple solution for our residents at this time, which is to take out goats, rabbits, and poultry from the definition of domestic household pets and add them to the section 155A2, 155A2D. So residents would be able to have a structure up to 50 square feet for dogs, cats, miniature goats, chickens, and rabbits. So I do want to state that we already do have an animal code that states that your animals do need to remain on your property and that your structure needs to be clean and sanitary. And so this right now would be a simple solution that would help our residents right now. And but I do think as we go through the comprehensive land use plan, that this topic may be revisited as we look at our residential zoning. So that's what I have.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
When we talk about structures, what can you describe? Are we talking about fencing or building?
No. So an actual structure, I think it has to be less than 50. Yeah, there you go. So like a lot of chicken coops, I don't even think considered structures because they're so small. But I mean, you can have a structure for your animals. And as long as it's under 50 square feet, that's what would be acceptable.
Yeah, I think the intention was really like a doghouse. I think that was what our code was really contemplating when they drafted that. But this would allow structures for animals to live in that are less than 50 square foot outside.
Okay.
Randy, did I capture that? Okay.
I gotta tell you just a quick story. We were coming back from Courier Circle on Kirkville Road just before we crossed the railroad tracks, heading to Fly Road. A coyote ran right across the road, and I'm not sure what kind of animal it had in its mouth, but it looked really happy. So we better consider those wild animals that are out there, shopping.
I've had personal experience with that issue. So I understand. It's a challenge for sure. We are not a city. We have wildlife everywhere, which helps with the deer problem. So hopefully.
Right.
And I was going for a run one Thanksgiving. Yeah, I was still living with my parents in Manlius, so this is probably 20 years ago. And I came face to face with a coyote.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, I ran a lot faster when I stopped, turned, and sprinted back the other way.
So I guess we need to set a public hearing. Elaine, is that what we're looking at doing here for this?
Well, we wanted to see if everyone was kind of happy with this, more of a simple solution, and if everyone was good with that, we can set the public hearing and get that going.
Elaine, it's simple and elegant and meets the purpose. Thank you so much.
And maybe it'll help answer a lot of the questions that are out there. You like the coyotes and so on. So, do you want to set that? I mean, is everyone all right with going forward with the public hearing, setting it up?
Okay.
Oh, would you like to hear about dates?
I would, thank you.
Yes.
The next Onondaga County Planning Board deadline is February 26th, which puts, as I'm coming back with a response on March 10th. And we would also need to do notifications to neighboring municipalities and municipalities within our own. So that would give us certainly enough time.
So you're looking at
Okay,
March?
so March.
Is that what we're looking at?
Yes. And if you, I know last time we did set a public hearing for 6:45 just because of open podium, but if you did want to set it for 6:35, even if you don't open it then, it's still okay for you to set it at that time because then people will have been there. But what could happen if we do that is we wouldn't be able to open the public hearing until 6:45 and we'd have to shuffle the agenda.
Okay.
Okay.
So you want to set that, Elaine?
Sure. So I'd like to make a motion to set the public hearing for March 10th at 6:45.
6:35.
6:35 is it just to allow certain animals in R1 zone?
Yes, it's as the local law has been presented to you by the attorney. So each of you has the local law. It's 2012 or 2021 dash something.
Whatever. Yeah.
And I'll second the motion.
Thank you.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Very good. All right. Thank you, Tim and Elaine. And Allison, we're moving on to you now with something with the peddler's permit.
Yes, I actually have two things. So I'll start with the first issue. We did an audit of our oaths and we discovered, and I'm not sure how, but we do not have Arnie Poltenson's oath of office. So what we would like to do after consulting with Tim and reviewing our records to make sure that there were no substantial votes that Arnie came down to and was the deciding vote, of which there was not. If I could have a motion to reappoint Arnie to fill the remainder of his term until 2023. I have spoken with him. He is going to come right in and do his oath of office tomorrow.
All right, so it was just we missed getting it done. I guess.
It's almost sort of like a housekeeping issue.
Very good. So we'll just need a motion for that.
Yeah, Mr. Supervisor, I'd be glad to make that motion in regard to Arnold Poltenson.
Okay, Karen.
And I'll second.
All right, very good. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Very good.
Okay, and then the other issue that I have is peddler permits. So we do have a peddler permit law on the books. During COVID, we have received some requests for peddler permits. We have asked them to go back to the county and get something from the county saying that they're okay. The county doesn't, I'm not sure that the county has a mechanism to provide that. And we now have two substantial requests for peddling and soliciting in the town of Manlius. One we do not really have any control over because it's a not-for-profit citizens campaign for the environment. So we, in our code, we just merely ask them to register. And then the other is for a pest control service. I am the deciding factor as town clerk as to whether or not a peddler permit is issued. So we have them go get a background check and they file paperwork and proof of insurance and things like that. But I want the town board's opinion on whether or not you want peddling and soliciting right now in the community during COVID, or how you'd like to handle that. I talked it over with Tim and we just sort of decided to throw it out here to you guys and see what you had to say about it. That's a tough
So is
call.
this going door to door? Like
Yes.
actually knocking on doors of people?
Mhm.
That's a tough one because mask or not, the people at the door, mask or not, I mean, how do you warn anybody when you come into the door that they should have a mask on before you solicit them, even though you have a mask on? That's a tricky one. Go ahead, Karen.
Yeah, I'm just cautious at this point in time. We're not by no means fully open yet with this pandemic, Allison. And I would be very cautious about going forward with the peddlers at this point in time.
I wouldn't want to stand in the way of anyone's ability to reach potential customers, but I also think that I think that the public could be very concerned that we were sort of authorizing people to be out in the neighborhood when they have to get a permit to do so, and that it was our judgment that these people should be out and about knocking on doors with our encouragement, basically, when mailings, and we're doing our meetings virtually for this reason. If we can't allow people to be in the room with us while we're having a town meeting, why do we think that having somebody knock on their doors is safe? I would just think, I agree that the timing, I have no problem with this in a non-public health crisis situation.
Tim, would we need some sort of resolution temporarily suspending that, or?
No, so what'll happen would be that if somebody applied, you would turn them down because of the ongoing COVID situation. I think they have the right to appeal to the town board afterward. And then the town board we're giving you a sense of, I think, how the town board would respond to somebody who appealed to it for a peddler permit. So I think that was really just the discussion tonight. What are you looking for, some specific action from the town board, Allison?
I have a quick question though, Tim, for you when you get a chance before we do anything.
If I could get I don't know if it would have any effect, but if I could get a resolution temporarily suspending peddler permits, I know it's a local law, so I don't know.
That's fine. Go ahead, Heather, answer. We could do
Yeah,
that.
my question is anyone prevented from coming back to you in a certain time period if they've been denied?
No, I don't think we've had that.
Because it's once it's safe, like in the few, if there something changes with state recommendations or blah, 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 or the summertime, I mean, there's going to be a moment where we won't be in the same situation.
Right. I think if the board wants to pass a resolution that says, based on just like we did with when we waived the requirement for public meetings and did it by Zoom, if the board wants to pass a motion that says, as a result of the COVID-19 epidemic, whatever we want to call it, pandemic, I guess is what the word everybody uses, that for the safety, for the wealth, safety, and health of health, safety, and welfare of the residents of the town, we will suspend issuing of peddler permits until frankly, the state of New York gives us a sense that we're safe to do that or to allow that.
So I think John wanted to say something.
No, I think exactly that, like Tim just laid out, is the right course of action to take here, because we don't want to be in a situation where we've given the okay like by issuing this permit, we are implying that it's okay for them to go door to door for commercial purposes. And, you know, all of our businesses are facing restrictions. And I think it's appropriate to say that until there's real guidance, you know, we are going to be as careful as we need to be and say no, that it's, you know, not something we're going to want to allow to happen.
So I would
Abby?
suggest, Tim, maybe looking at New York State's thing to say it's phase, whatever phase it would be of reopening, so that there's like there is an endpoint to it, but it wouldn't be us deciding that, it would be the state's reopening plan, something like that.
Yeah.
Well, it could be state and county, Sarah, too, you know.
Or if so if,
Yeah,
you know, it's
definitely.
whatever it is, it'll be phase 3 of reopening or whatever, when it's
Well, I
safe.
wouldn't
to
put a
come back.
hard, I mean, since those things change so much, Sarah, I wonder if like putting a number, isn't as meaningful as saying based on the updated guidelines of the, you know, the
Okay.
public health crisis or something.
Yeah,
So Ally,
I just want us to be able to know when it's time, so that a peddler can come back to Allison and say, yeah, I want to do it now.
Yeah, I don't want to put that onus on Allison to, you know, well, we're not doing it now. And then they come back later and, well, we'll take
Right.
it forward. We've already made up our mind. You know?
Maybe
And-
if social
Mhm.
distancing isn't recommended any longer, maybe that would be the key.
Heather?
Deb and I can keep an eye on that and kind of give you guys a call to action, I guess, maybe when you want to lift that. The other issue is that there are people who are exempt from our law. And this would not apply, correct, Tim?
great.
Okay.
Yeah,
For
there
religious
are
reasons, or who's exempt?
Not for profits, religious organizations, politicians.
We're not peddlers or solicitors, just so.
That's interesting to know. Thanks.
And maybe we include in the resolution the fact that, you know, anyone who is exempt from the need for a peddler permit follow current, you know, county health and CDC guidelines to the best of their abilities. And, you know, we just ask for cooperation on that one. That way we make it clear that, you know, we're going to not give out permits, you know, that we don't have to give out, just like with other businesses facing restrictions. But for everybody else, we do expect you to be being as safe as possible.
Right. Yeah, that sounds good.
Like Randy has a question.
Dealing with the people every single day, they are extremely nervous about having me even go in doing inspections in their home. I'll put a mask on, they make me take my boots, my coat off, and leave everything at the door, and they stay at least 10 feet from me while I do my inspection, and out the door I go. So people are really skittish about, you know, foreigners or somebody coming to their door that they're not expecting. I think that would raise a lot of issues with people in the public. And I think the direction the board is going is fantastic. I think it's great.
Okay, so Allison,
Mhm.
If the board directs me tonight to draft a resolution for the next board meeting, are you okay with that? Or
Yeah, I'll let them know. I mean, because even if
Yeah.
they wanted to apply, technically I could deny it and then they would
Yeah.
appeal. And so, but I'm comfortable having that conversation.
okay,
Maybe we should eliminate the exemptions.
No, I
we
don't.
can't. There's a state law that actually governs all this, peddler permits, and believe it or not, I think it's in the executive law. So our law is based on that law, on the state law. So my recollection is that there are certain, you can't regulate people go, it's almost a free speech issue when it comes to non-commercial types of solicitation. But I think that in the environment we're in now, things are different, and the town could take a position where health, safety and welfare is going to be taken into consideration.
Very good. So do we need to make a motion, or you want to put it together and we'll do it at the next?
Yeah, I'll have something drafted for the next meeting, okay?
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Anything else, Allison?
I don't think so.
Mr. Supervisor,
Yes, sir.
and I'm going to ask Allison this on, there was an issue, and the reason it's even come back to me, was somebody mentioned a park in the town. Somebody had asked me the question about
Oh, yes.
property, and they wanted to donate it, basically donate it to the town.
Yes, I emailed the town board about that.
Okay.
I'm very glad you remember that. The Himpler estate.
Yeah.
So the position of the town has been, we don't own property. We just haven't, we just haven't owned property. We don't even own property the town hall sits on, I don't think. But
We own the town hall.
with that,
We own the building here.
yeah, I think we own the building, but not, but somebody has offered property to us out of an estate that it's probably a residential property. It's not big enough for anything that I think we would find useful. It just becomes a liability in terms of maintenance and upkeep. I just wanted to pass that by the board and make sure we can tell this resident that it's not something that the town is interested in doing. Does anybody disagree with that, or does anybody?
Not really. I mean, the villages, you know, I mean, they have all the parks. I mean, we have a state park. I mean, I've had people ask me as well. Actually, something I'm working on right now with Fayetteville, but that's something else in the future I'll bring up. But
I
other
don't recall receiving anything about this. And I'm searching my emails. I'm not seeing anything here. When might that have come across our desk?
It was an email that I sent about agenda items, and I think there was a map included in it. And Deb had pulled up a map just so you could see where it is, because it's actually, I think it's in the Homewood tract. And so there are houses that are along each side, and the parcel is actually in the middle of those houses.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm seeing it here now.
So an alternative to something like this that, you know, can be recommended to people would be things like having an HOA be formed and receive it if it's in a neighborhood, that kind of thing too, isn't it?
That's
Yeah.
I think the easiest recommendation would be for a neighbor to purchase it. So I think what you're asking is, does the town want it? And I think the answer is no. And then, but you could advise the family when you speak with them that they could, you know, consult with somebody to help them get rid of it a different way.
Could the town take it as a donation and then sell it and keep the money?
It's a good one.
I mean, that's where my mind's going. Like, can't we flip this house? And
It's not a house, it's a vacant lot.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's a big,
But isn't it behind the house? Like it's
yeah, it's in the,
like it's landlocked, right?
Yeah.
You can't even get to it.
right.
Yeah.
oh, okay. Yeah, no, I don't think we can do that, Heather.
Yeah, but then, oh, okay. I was gonna say, or we could take it as a gift, sell it to the neighbors if they're interested, not for profit, but just to sell it. People get the tax. I don't know if this is legal. I'm asking.
Now you're thinking like a businesswoman, Heather. You're not thinking. Yeah,
Sorry about that.
We're not in the business of flipping property.
Real estate.
I'm sorry, I work for all these not-for-profits, so I think about the donated cars and you know, and I have this context of, you know, knowing the university.
Yes, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
So many things I've learned since that are not business related with the town. It's crazy.
Well, I'm not soliciting this, but
Nope.
it is totally fine for people to think about giving in their estates things to the town. And we love to have these problems, because if you want to do something to better the community, I'd love to be in the position where we have to sort of figure out what to do with wonderful gifts.
Spoken like a true fundraiser. Very good.
Make sure. So I'm seeing this map now, and there's all the rectangles that are behind these houses. So these are all parcels that are owned by people that don't necessarily live in the houses that they're next to?
Typically, the parcels are owned by the house in front of them, but there have been scenarios where they are not. I would imagine this is a one-off type scenario. And maybe someone owned that parcel. I'm sure there's a story behind it. but that is something we run into. We've actually had issues in the past in different neighborhoods where we've had parcels like this, and then mowing becomes an issue. And I see Rob shaking his head.
A lot of people shaking their heads are like, yeah, mowing the lawn.
Yeah. So,
That's the benefit we get, mowing the lawn.
Well, there are all kinds of, things to think about in the future, and we can talk with the comprehensive planning folks about, sometimes community plots can be great for vegetable patches that can, whatever, or it can be like a little gathering space for whatever. I mean, there are all kinds of things that neighborhoods could think about doing together, creatively, that we hope they would take on, but we could certainly planning wise provide some guidance.
Sure.
And Caitlin, this traditionally, Tim and Rob, just jump in. This traditionally has been a reoccurring issue in different areas of the Homewood tract.
Yes.
The history is that was kind of a planned community dating back to the 1920s. So there are a series of paper streets and lots that weren't built on, that people have passed away, and neighbors pitted against neighbors and
Paper street.
that's a very long.
Yep.
It's a street that was proposed in a subdivision that was never built.
Is that what we're seeing here with this, like this big rectangle in the middle? Was that supposed to be a road, and then those were supposed to be new houses facing
It could very well be. I don't have it in front of me, but I think, right? Yeah, I think you may be onto it.
Yes, at the end, Caitlin, at the end of the development, that's typically where they had the paper streets, and we've abandoned those since. The town has abandoned those streets. So yeah, and Doug's exactly right. I mean, it's really weird down in there. Some homeowners own the adjacent properties, some don't. So it's kind of a real odd situation there.
I did have this happen with a client of mine. They inherited a piece of property that was landlocked and just in the middle of nowhere. And it was just this little square that you couldn't get to. And they're like, is it worth a lot of money? I was like, probably not. So I think that I'm inclined to agree that this one particular parcel is probably more of a liability with all the trees on there. Yeah, I'm not sure that it's something that would be really beneficial to the town, but it is something I completely agree with Heather, that we need to be pursuing opportunities I want a town park. I want to fight you on this side that the liabilities are worth the community benefit, but perhaps not this one parcel at this time.
I'm not saying that I'm going to fight on that all the time, Caitlin.
Well, that's okay. Well, we can fight later about it.
Yeah, we'll talk about it later. Tim, anything else that you just remembered? No?
Sorry about that. No, thank you for the guidance.
I thought it was going to be the chickens that was going to really hook Caitlin tonight, but it wasn't. It was the paper streets.
So we can.
My autobiography, The Paper Streets. I really think that's like poetic somehow. I'm going to Google this later. I'm excited. This is my rabbit hole for the evening.
Very good. All right, Chief, I think you're up. Believe it or not, it's your turn. What do you have for us tonight?
Just a few things, Mr. Supervisor. Our new employee starts very soon, and I hope to bring her to the board members. Hopefully we're meeting in person at the time. And Caitlin Beebe is her name, and she's going to be starting very soon. Her whole family is from Manoa, so it's a nice local piece. Continue to work with the county as the chair in the executive order, the governor's executive order 203 on reform for police agencies. We're hoping to have a draft out. I'm thinking at the latter part of this week or maybe early next week for public review. Learned about a new governor's executive order 70B, which effective April 1st of 2021 makes the Attorney General in charge of all incidents associated with deaths at the hands of law enforcement. I have a meeting next week with one of the chiefs from the Attorney General's office to discuss the rules, I guess, related to that. And then lastly, February in-service, we're 2 segments through our February in-service training. In February, we talked about goals for 2021 for the police department. All of our officers were updated on their CPR certification. We had a really great session on implicit bias. And lastly, we talked about drug driving, which is an incredible issue right now with law enforcement. The good news is the town of Manlius Police Department is the only town agency in the county that have dedicated themselves towards drug driving. And we have two DREs, and we're way ahead of the curve on that. So that's all I have.
Very good. Yeah, that's important. I know Ann was unable to be here tonight. Allison, did you have anything that Ann needed to cover this evening? No? Okay. Okay, next, which is our new committee report, item 19. So we're going to start out with the Communications Committee report, which I think, John, do you have a report on that for us tonight?
Yeah, so we had our first meeting of the Communications Committee. It was great, very packed meeting. We really started off, reviewing the social media policy that we just passed. Making sure everyone was on board. Understood what the intent of all those rules were, and how specific people are meant to interact with that. The general idea here is that site administrators, anybody who's running one of our Facebook pages or a website or anything like that, has authority to make decisions about moderating content. The Communications Committee can serve as the group that would provide oversight to that, to make sure the rules were followed, the rules are appropriate, continue to be appropriate. So that was a great way to start off. And then we, kind of got into a conversation about what does the Communications Committee do moving forward, and what are the goals that we, hope to pursue this year and into the next. And we all, agreed generally that a communications plan is a good long-term goal, something that we can put together that guides outgoing communications to make sure we're speaking with the same voice. We're always referring to things, reliably, using the same type of branding, the kind of stuff that, any company would go through to make sure that, their branding is consistent and customers know who they are. The same thing for our residents here. We want to make sure that when communications come from the town, whatever department it might be, whatever, platform it's on, that it's consistent and reliable and recognizable, so that people get to understand that the town communicates quite a bit. And, if you're paying attention, you'll start to really see that it's a cohesive story that we're trying to tell. And then, one of the main takeaways, I think, in the short term is engaging the department heads with a, I don't want to call it a communications audit, more of an inventory, so that, the Communications Committee can really start to understand how do we communicate outward. Whether that's through a social media platform, a letter that gets sent out, a notice that gets posted, even something in the Eagle Bulletin, letting people know when we have a public hearing, just so that we can really start to understand, what are we currently doing? Are there gaps where we could add something? And then, where we're already communicating, from multiple departments in different formats, to make sure we can start, better understanding best practices for that, and, really formalize, it's kind of the first step of that, putting that communications plan together. And I think, in general, that's going to be a large part of what we do this year is, just to better understand where we are, and make a plan moving forward, so that communication looks consistent across every part of the town. So it was a great meeting, and I'm looking forward to the next one.
So John, just to clarify a couple of things. I know we looked at the communication director issue or situation, and is this now more or less a different direction we're taking, but using what that was planned, that director to do, is what the committee will be doing? Is that the concept here?
Yeah, generally speaking, what we're going to be doing is better understanding our, I think, when we were talking about solving a problem, we didn't really know what we were looking for. And I think now we're starting to really understand what do we as a town need, and we're going to start addressing that moving forward. Yeah.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Excellent. Next, we have Sustainable Manlius, which, of course, Caitlin, I'm pretty sure that's yours.
I'm pretty sure it is too. Thank you. So Sustainable Manlius met last week. We meet the first Thursday of every month, and we had a couple new folks join us, which is great. Every committee meeting, new people are coming, and our list has grown. Not everyone, of course, comes to every meeting, but we have like 125 people now that sign up to get updates on our committee. And again, new members all the time, which is really great. We did get more information on the climate or the Clean Energy Communities program through NYSERDA. And we are officially a clean energy community, and we now qualify for a $5,000 grant. And so yay, I know we did that. And there's a lot of information that I would encourage everyone on the board to look through, because there's a lot of potential for more grants for the town to go after. We can get up to $100,000 in grants if we move fairly quickly, not super quickly, but the grants are first come, first serve. We would have to do quite a lot to get to that point, but there are a lot of grants available along the way. One thing that we've been encouraged to look at again is the stretch code, which we did look at last year. And so I'm planning on reevaluating that with Randy again. It would get us a lot of points, and we would get a $5,000 grant just for adopting the stretch code. So definitely take a look at the Clean Energy Communities program in more detail. And if you have any questions on it, let me know. But this will be more of an all hands on deck program than just a sustainable Manlius program, because there's a lot of different parts of the town that could be impacted by moving forward with these initiatives. So we talked quite a bit about that new program, as well as continuing to go after becoming a designated climate smart community through the DEC. So we're making progress, and we have those meetings every month. So every month we have to figure out what we're going to talk about, and we just keep pushing forward. It's going really, really well.
Very good. Sounds like a valuable meeting.
You should come, Ed, to our next meeting. You
Yeah,
should come.
Yeah, I'll try to hook in on that. You send out the reminders, right?
Yeah, first Thursday of every month at 7 p.m. So I believe it's March 4th at 7.
Thursday nights are tough for me. I'll explain it later. Anyway, we have tree commission and then comprehensive plan. I know, Heather, you would maybe take both of these if you want to,
Sure, I'll be brief. We have a tree commission meeting coming up on the 16th at 5. Please feel free to join us. We are going to be welcoming folks who are passionate about this area of sustainability and sort of in planning. And we see it as our mission to sort of look at our codes and zoning related to trees, and also how we're supporting the agenda that Sustainable Manlius has. And so the Arbor, another good bit of news is that the Arbor Day Foundation has once again commended us and bestowed upon us the certification as a tree city. So that's great news. And I want to thank the community for and for the town for always being supportive of the tenets of what it takes to be a tree city. Related to comprehensive planning, we had a wonderful session with Barbara Revette. I may have mentioned that before, and it's still available on our town webpage. And that concludes sort of the 3 original listening sessions we planned before we started our relationship with our consulting partner. Our next phase will be to, of course, begin conversations with our consulting partner and build the steering committee. And we want to make sure that there's space for folks who have raised their hand and been engaged and interested in comprehensive planning to know that they could have a seat at that table. So please, we want to encourage everybody to look out for that. And we'll make sure there's information about the comprehensive plan that's under the committees as well on our website. It's a little harder to find right now, and we'll make sure that it's there for folks. Anything else, Sarah, that you can think of?
No, thanks.
Yes, well, Sarah, why don't you pick up on the discussion on the water district update?
So we did have a water district meeting last week. It's really two water districts. I wanted to clarify that there is the Sky Ridge Water District and there's also a proposed Salt Springs Water District, and we're working with them together. We have finally sort of gotten to a point where we're ready to make a presentation. So at the March 10th meeting, Allison, we're going to have a water district presentation from the firm that's helping us with this, so that the board is all up to speed on where we're at. And at that meeting, we'll also initiate the environmental review process. And then we'll hold a public hearing 30 days later at the first April meeting, by which time we will have heard back from anybody who is an interested party in the seeker. So we would know if there were other players that needed to be involved. So that's kind of the schedule we're looking at right now. And then after the April public hearing would be when the petitions would be released for the formation of the water district.
Very good, and more to come on that. So looking forward to the presentation. All right, and moving along, well, it looks like it's my turn. And this is a real easy one tonight because I have my supervisor's report for December 2020. And I think you've all seen it, read it.
And Mr. Supervisor, I'd like to commend our department heads because everybody came in under budget.
That was the idea. I mean, that's great. It's really great. Very good, Sarah. So I need a motion to accept the supervisor's report.
Mr. Supervisor, I'll make a motion to accept your supervisor's report. Thank you.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay, John seconded. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, opposed? Carried. Very good. And last but not least, a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
And I'll second.
All right, all
Thank
in
you.
favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Good
Opposed?
night.
Oh, we're like, oh,
Sorry. I gotta carry it first, but we're good. Thank you, everyone.
Good night.
Tonight,
Good
covered
night,
it.
everyone.
Good night, thank you.
Bye.
bye.